Hey there, you looking kinda cute. Don't forget to subscribe and check out my other socials for more. Enjoy. Come on, Mark, it's just for a few hours, Elaine pleaded, her voice a mix of exasperation and amusement. Emily really needs your help with this project. Mark ran a hand through his salt and pepper hair, his brow furrowed.
I don't know, Elaine. Wearing a dress? It's not exactly something I ever pictured myself doing.
Elaine softened her stance, moving to sit beside her husband on the plush beige couch. She placed a gentle hand on his knee. I know it's outside your comfort zone, but think about how much it would mean to Emily. She's been struggling to fit in at her new school, and this project could really boost her confidence. Mark sighed, his shoulders slumping slightly. He knew his stepdaughter had been having a tough time since they moved to the new town. The thought of disappointing her made his chest tighten with guilt.
What exactly is this project anyway?
He asked, finally meeting Elaine's eyes. Elaine's face brightened, sensing a crack in Mark's resolve. It's for her sociology class. They are exploring gender roles and stereotypes. Emily wants to challenge perceptions by having a traditionally masculine figure embrace feminine clothing. Mark raised an eyebrow. And I'm the guinea pig? Elaine chuckled, the sound warm and inviting. Well, you are the most masculine man we know. Your construction work has given you quite the physique. She gave his bicep a playful squeeze. Despite his reservations, Mark felt a small smile tugging at the corners of his mouth.
Flattery will get you everywhere, Mrs. Thompson.
Is that a yes? Elaine's eyes sparkled with hope. Mark took a deep breath, weighing his options. On one hand, the idea of wearing a dress made him incredibly uncomfortable. On the other, the thought of letting down Emily, the girl he'd come to love as his own daughter, was unbearable. All right, he conceded with a heavy sigh. I'll do it, but just for the project and no pictures. Elaine clapped her hands together, her face lighting up with joy. Oh, Mark, thank you. Emily will be thrilled. She leaned in and planted a kiss on his cheek. I promise it won't be as bad as you think. Mark grimaced. Easy for you to say. You're not the one who has to squeeze into a dress. Elaine stood up, practically bouncing with excitement. Let's go tell Emily the good news. She's been holed up in her room all afternoon, probably worrying about this. As they made their way up the stairs, Mark's stomach churned with a mixture of dread and resignation. The things he did for love. Emily's door was closed, soft music drifting out from behind it. Elaine knocked gently. Emily, sweetie, can we come in? There was a shuffle of movement, and then the door cracked open. Emily's face appeared, her long brown hair slightly disheveled. Yeah? Elaine pushed the door open wider, revealing Emily's room. Posters of various bands and movies covered the walls, and clothes were strewn across the floor. A typical daughter's lair. Your stepdad has something he wants to tell you, Elaine said, nudging Mark forward. Emily's eyes widened with a mix of hope and apprehension. Really? Mark cleared his throat, suddenly feeling very self-conscious.
I've decided to help you with your project. I'll wear the dress.
Emily's face broke into a huge grin, her eyes lighting up with excitement. Oh my God, really? Thank you so much. She launched herself at Mark, wrapping her arms around him in a tight hug. Mark stumbled back slightly, surprised by the force of her embrace. He patted her back awkwardly, a warmth spreading through his chest at her obvious joy. It's no problem, kiddo, he said, his voice gruff with emotion. Just, let's keep this between us, okay? Emily pulled back, nodding vigorously. Of course! I promise I won't tell anyone at school it's you. This is going to be amazing! As Emily began to chatter excitedly about her plans for the project, Mark caught Elaine's eye over the girl's head. His wife mouthed a silent, thank you, her eyes shining with pride and love. Mark nodded, resigned to his fate, but secretly pleased at the happiness he'd brought to his family. How bad could wearing a dress for a few hours really be? The next few days passed in a whirlwind of preparation. Emily threw herself into planning the perfect outfit for Mark, while Elaine helped with measurements and alterations. Mark tried to stay out of it as much as possible, focusing on his work at the construction site and pretending the whole thing wasn't happening. Finally, the day of the project arrived. Mark stood in the master bedroom, staring at the garment laid out on the bed with a mixture of trepidation and disbelief. The dress was a deep burgundy color with a modest neckline and a flowing skirt that fell just below the knee. It was actually quite tasteful, Mark had to admit, but the thought of putting it on made his palms sweat. Elaine entered the room, carrying a pair of black heels.
"Are you ready, honey?"
Mark swallowed hard.
"As ready as I'll ever be, I suppose."
Elaine set the shoes down and moved to help Mark with the dress. As they worked to get him into it, she couldn't help but notice the tension in his shoulders. "You're doing a wonderful thing for Emily," she said softly, zipping up the back of the dress. "I'm so proud of you." Mark grunted, fidgeting with the unfamiliar fabric.
"I feel ridiculous."
Elaine stepped back to survey her handiwork. Despite Mark's discomfort, she couldn't help but admire how the dress hugged his muscular frame in all the right places. "You look beautiful," she said, her voice filled with sincerity. Mark snorted. "Beautiful isn't exactly what I'm going for." Elaine handed him the heels. "Just try them on. Emily insisted they were necessary for the full effect." With a deep sigh, Mark sat on the edge of the bed and slipped the shoes onto his feet. To his surprise, they fit perfectly. "How did you find heels in my size?" he asked, incredulous. Elaine smiled mischievously. "I have my ways. Now stand up and let's see how you walk in them." Mark gripped the bedpost as he carefully stood, wobbling slightly as he adjusted to the new center of gravity. He took a tentative step forward, then another. To both their surprise, Mark moved with unexpected grace in the heels. His natural athleticism seemed to translate well to this new challenge. "Wow!" Elaine breathed, watching her husband stride across the room with increasing confidence. "You're a natural." Mark couldn't help but feel a small surge of pride at her words. "Well, I've always been good on my feet. I guess this isn't so different from balancing on a beam at work." Elaine's eyes sparkled with an emotion Mark couldn't quite place.
"You know, you really do look stunning. The dress suits you."
Mark felt a blush creeping up his neck.
"Don't get any ideas. This is a one-time thing."
Elaine stepped closer, running her hands along the smooth fabric covering Mark's chest. "Are you sure about that? Because I have to say, seeing you like this is quite appealing." Mark's breath caught in his throat at the look in his wife's eyes. It was a mixture of admiration, desire, and something else. Mischief? Before he could respond, there was a knock at the door. "Dad, are you ready?" Emily's voice called out. Mark cleared his throat, stepping back from Elaine. "Yeah, kiddo, I'll be right out." As he moved towards the door, Elaine's voice stopped him. "Mark?" He turned to look at her, one hand on the doorknob. Elaine's smile was both loving and slightly wicked. "I think we might need to keep you in skirts more often. You wear them too well to let this be a one-time thing." Mark's eyes widened in shock, but before he could protest, Emily's impatient voice came again. "Come on, Dad, we're going to be late." With one last bewildered look at his wife, Mark opened the door and stepped out to face his stepdaughter's reaction. Emily's jaw dropped as she took in the sight of her stepfather in full feminine attire. "Oh my God," she breathed. "You look amazing." Mark shifted uncomfortably, tugging at the hem of the dress. "Thanks, I guess. Let's just get this over with, okay?" Emily nodded eagerly, practically bouncing with excitement. "Of course! I've got the camera all set up in the living room. We just need to take a few photos for my presentation, and then you're done." As they made their way downstairs, Mark couldn't help but notice how different it felt to walk in heels. The sway of his hips, the way the dress moved against his skin, it was all so foreign, yet not entirely unpleasant. In the living room, Emily had set up a makeshift studio with lights and a plain backdrop. She directed Mark to stand in front of it, adjusting his pose and the fall of the dress. "Okay, now give me a confident smile," she instructed, raising the camera to her eye. Mark tried his best to comply, feeling anything but confident. As the camera clicked away, he couldn't shake the memory of Elaine's words upstairs. Surely she hadn't been serious about keeping him in skirts. After what felt like an eternity, Emily lowered the camera. "These are perfect. Thank you so much, Dad. You've really saved my project." Mark felt a warmth bloom in his chest at her gratitude. "Anything for you, kiddo. Now, can I please go change?" Emily nodded, already scrolling through the photos on her camera. "Of course, I'll start working on my presentation right away." As Mark turned to head back upstairs, he found Elaine blocking his path. The look in her eyes made him pause. "Not so fast, handsome," she purred, running a hand down his arm. "I think we need to have a little chat about your new wardrobe." Mark's eyes widened. "Elaine, you can't be serious. This was just for Emily's project." Elaine's smile grew wider. "Oh, I'm very serious. You look far too good in that dress to let it go to waste."
"Besides, I think you're enjoying it more than you're letting on." Mark opened his mouth to protest, but found he couldn't quite form the words. To his surprise, a part of him was thrilled by Elaine's suggestion. Elaine leaned in close, her lips brushing his ear as she whispered, "I think we need to find you a new name to go with your new look. How does Justine sound?" A shiver ran down Mark's spine at her words. He knew he should object, should put his foot down and assert his masculinity. But as he stood there in the soft, flowing dress, feeling more seen and appreciated than he had in years, he found himself nodding slowly. "Justine," he repeated softly, testing the name on his tongue. I think I like it." Elaine's face lit up with joy and a hint of triumph. "Perfect. Now, let's go upstairs and see what else we can find for Justine to wear. I have a feeling this is the start of a beautiful new chapter in our lives." As Mark, now Justine, followed his wife up the stairs, he felt a mixture of excitement and trepidation. He had no idea where this new path would lead, but with Elaine by his side, he was ready to explore it. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of discovery for Mark, or rather, Justine. Elaine threw herself into the task of building a new wardrobe for her husband with an enthusiasm that both thrilled and terrified him. At first, the changes were subtle. A silky camisole under his work shirt, a pair of panties instead of his usual boxers. Justine found himself growing accustomed to the feel of soft fabrics against his skin, the way they hugged his body in ways his old clothes never had. Elaine was patient, never pushing too hard, but always encouraging Justine to embrace this new side of himself. She would leave out a skirt or a blouse, casually suggesting he might want to try it on when he got home from work. One evening, about a month into their new arrangement, Justine arrived home to find Elaine waiting for him with a mischievous glint in her eye. "I've got a surprise for you," she said, taking his hand and leading him upstairs. In their bedroom, laid out on the bed, was a stunning emerald green cocktail dress. Beside it sat a pair of matching heels, higher than any Justine had worn before. "We're going out tonight," Elaine announced, her tone brooking no argument. "I want to show off my beautiful wife." Justine felt a flutter of panic in his chest. "Out? But people will see. They'll know." Elaine cupped his face in her hands, her eyes full of love and reassurance. "Let them see. You're gorgeous, Justine. It's time the world knew it too." With trembling hands, Justine allowed Elaine to help him into the dress. As the zipper slid up his back, he felt a sense of rightness settle over him. The fabric clung to his curves he'd developed through careful padding and the beginnings of hormone therapy Elaine had gently suggested. Elaine stepped back, her eyes roaming appreciatively over Justine's form. "Perfect," she breathed. "Now for the finishing touches." She guided Justine to the vanity, where she applied a light touch of makeup, a sweep of mascara, a hint of blush, and a deep red lipstick that matched the dress perfectly. As Justine stared at his reflection,
He barely recognized himself. The person looking back at him was beautiful, confident, radiant. For the first time, he felt truly comfortable in his own skin. "Ready to paint the town red?" Elaine asked, offering her arm. Justine took a deep breath, straightened his shoulders, and nodded.
"Ready as I'll ever be."
They stepped out into the warm evening air, Justine's heels clicking on the pavement. He felt exposed, vulnerable, but Elaine's steady presence at his side gave him strength. Their first stop was a chic wine bar downtown. As they entered, Justine felt all eyes turn towards them. He tensed, waiting for the judgment, the ridicule, but it never came. Instead, he heard whispers of admiration. "Look at that couple. They're stunning. I wish I had legs like hers." Elaine squeezed his hand, a proud smile on her face. "See, I told you. You're beautiful, Justine." As the night wore on, Justine felt his confidence growing. He laughed, he flirted, he danced. For the first time in his life, he felt truly free to be himself. When they finally returned home, flushed with wine and happiness, Elaine pulled Justine close. "Thank you," she whispered, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "Thank you for trusting me, for being brave enough to be your true self." Justine felt a lump form in his throat. "No, thank you. For seeing me, really seeing me, for loving all of me." As they fell into bed, a tangle of limbs and silky fabric, Justine knew that this was just the beginning. There would be challenges ahead, no doubt. Explaining to Emily, facing colleagues and friends, navigating the complex world of gender identity. But with Elaine by his side, Justine felt ready to face anything. He was finally becoming the person he was always meant to be, and the future had never looked brighter. As the weeks turned into months, Justine's transformation continued, both internally and externally. The hormone therapy began to soften his features, redistributing fat and smoothing out his skin. His construction colleagues were initially shocked by the changes, but to Justine's surprise, most were supportive once they understood. Emily, true to her open-minded nature, took the news of her stepfather's transition in stride. She became Justine's fiercest advocate, defending him against any negativity and helping him navigate the intricacies of feminine fashion and makeup. One sunny Saturday afternoon, Justine found himself in the mall with Emily, their arms laden with shopping bags. They had just finished a marathon shopping session, picking out new outfits for Justine's expanding wardrobe. I still can't believe how natural you look in heels, Mom," Emily said, using the term she'd adopted for Justine with surprising ease. "It's like you were born to wear them." Justine laughed, a light, melodious sound that still sometimes surprised him. "Well, I had a good teacher in your mother, though I have to admit, I never thought I'd enjoy shopping this much." As they made their way towards the food court, a familiar voice called out, "Mark, is that you?" Justine froze, his heart racing. Turning slowly, he came face to face with Tom, his old college roommate whom he hadn't seen in years. Tom's eyes were wide with shock as he took in Justine's appearance, the flowing summer dress, the carefully applied makeup, the long hair that now framed his face. For a moment, Justine considered fleeing, but Emily's supportive hand on his arm gave him courage. He took a deep breath and smiled. "Hello, Tom. It's Justine now, actually." Tom blinked rapidly, processing the information. Wow, this is unexpected." An awkward silence fell between them. Justine braced himself for rejection, for disgust, for the loss of an old friendship. But then, to his amazement, Tom's face broke into a warm smile. "Well, Justine, it's wonderful to see you. You look happy." The tension drained from Justine's body. "I am happy, Tom. Happier than I've ever been." Tom nodded, his eyes full of understanding. "That's all that matters, then. Listen, we should catch up sometime. Maybe you and Elaine could come over for dinner. I'm sure Diane would love to see you, too." Justine felt tears prick at the corners of his eyes. "We'd love that, Tom. Thank you." As Tom walked away with a friendly wave, Justine turned to Emily, who was beaming with pride. "See?" she said, squeezing his hand. "People can surprise you, and anyone who can't accept you for who you are doesn't deserve to be in your life anyway." Justine pulled his stepdaughter into a tight hug, marveling at her wisdom and acceptance. "When did you get so smart, kiddo?" Emily grinned up at him. "I learned from the best. Now, how about we celebrate with some ice cream? I think we've earned it after all this shopping." As they sat in the food court, enjoying their sweet treats, Justine felt a sense of peace wash over him. The journey hadn't been easy, and he knew there would be more challenges ahead. But surrounded by the love and support of his family, he felt invincible. That evening, as Justine recounted the day's events to Elaine, he couldn't help but reflect on how far he'd come. From reluctantly agreeing to wear a dress for Emily's school project to fully embracing his true identity, it had been a whirlwind of a year. Elaine listened with rapt attention, her eyes shining with pride and love. When Justine finished speaking, she took his hands in hers. "I am so incredibly proud of you," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "You've shown such bravery and grace throughout this entire journey. I fall in love with you more every day."
Justine felt his heart swell with affection. "I couldn't have done it without you, my love. You saw the real me before I even knew who that was." Elaine leaned in. "And I'll be here to remind you of who you are every single day, if that's what you need."
As they settled into bed that night, Justine nestled against Elaine's side, feeling safe and cherished. He thought back to that first day, standing awkwardly in the burgundy dress, uncertain and afraid. How far he'd come since then. He knew the road ahead might not always be smooth. There would be people who wouldn't understand, who might reject him. But he also knew that he had a family who loved him unconditionally, friends who accepted him for who he truly was, and a strength within himself that he never knew existed. Justine closed his eyes, a contented smile on his lips. Tomorrow was a new day, full of possibilities, and he was ready to face it as his authentic self, with the love of his life by his side. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to check out my other socials if you want more wonderful content, early access, behind the scenes, and more. All links down below.